to rape. Of all the major slave societies in the New World, only in the United States did the slave population naturally increase over time. The 400,000 people that we imported from Africa had become nearly 4 million by the outbreak of the Civil War. The numbers are staggering, and so was the violence required to keep them all under control. This small museum in Walterboro, South Carolina, holds evidence of that violence. Objects that seem to come from the Middle Ages.
Oh man, look at that.
Yeah, for the neck.
No way.
They would pour salt in the wounds of people after they'd been whipped.
Yeah.
Men, women, children whipped.
Slave muzzle.
What had that person said? Why was that person being muzzled? You know, what always strikes me when I look at items like this, probably some enslaved blacksmith created these items.
You had to make the instruments for your own oppression.
Exactly.
What choices did you have?
The shackles.
You have all of these implements of torture, which are tools for punishing people, right, who don't do what they're supposed to do. But they're also symbolic, right? So if you see someone muzzled or whipped in your community, you're warned what not to do. It creates this pervasive sense of fear and terror. Slavery doesn't have to mean that you're whipped every day, you're raped every day, that you're tortured every day, to be incredibly destructive to one's spirit and soul and being. You just have to commit such shocking violence upon the bodies of a few examples that nobody else would dare to think about it. Now, the funny thing is, people still do dare, right? Right? You still do have people saying, like, well, you know, whatever they got, it's got to be better than this.
Early on the morning of August 22nd, 1831, a group of slaves crept into the plantation house that once stood on these Virginia fields. They killed the planter and his wife. Then they killed the children. The bloodiest slave revolt in American history was underway. Over the next 2 days, more than 60 white people would die.
They go house to house, and as they go, they pretty much kill every man, woman, and child that they can find. It was incredibly personal. These are the people that these rebels were killing were often people whom they'd grown up with, whose parents had enslaved their parents.
The slaves were led by a man named Nat Turner, a self-styled prophet who claimed that God had told him to slay his enemies. In hindsight, his motive seemed much simpler.
Why did he do it? Why him? Why here? Why then?
He did it because slavery was awful. Slavery was horrible. He did it because daily he was watching communities be torn apart. He did it because he knew the stories of women abused by slave owners. He knew the stories of how from farm to farm being split up was horrible. And he knew the constant threat of being shipped away.
Turner's revolt was crushed on this field by a local militia. Looking back, it's easy to see it as a suicide mission, the desperate act of a people pushed too far. But it was more than that. Turner made real the secret hopes of millions of slaves, and he sent shockwaves across slaveholding America.
The Nat Turner Revolt happens in an international context where not only are the abolitionists in the North beginning to gear up their agitation against slavery, but also in the British Empire, slavery is on its last legs. In 1838, it's over, and slavery has ended in the British Empire. Southern planters are overwhelmingly concerned with this. They know that if slavery is not defended aggressively, it's going to be over, right? And Nat Turner is just one warning signal among many that they're on the losing side of a global battle.
In the wake of Turner's revolt, Southern planters defended themselves by launching an intense ideological campaign, projecting an image of happy slaves and benevolent masters, arguing that their way of life was beneficial to both races.
There were some pro-slavery writers who argued that what slavery really was the possibility of perfecting the human condition. It's like Americans have been given this gift of Africans. These were people who came to see slavery as something not just good, but natural, permanent, possibly the way you create the ideal community, the ideal world.
Scientists even tried to prove that black people were part of a different species, a species suited for slavery by nature.
They would actually start measuring the size of black people's skulls, and they would talk about how they were not as intelligent because of the shapes of their heads, the size of their brains. And then they would look at things like how robust they were in terms of their, not their brains, but their bodies. And they'd say, well, look at their physical bodies. This is what they're made for, this kind of work.